With Mr. Bill Okero. Inflation is trending at a high we haven't seen in 63 months as we speak. And the Kenya Kwanza government is telling us our intervention, our understanding is that we're dealing with a production problem. We have been trying to subsidize consumption. We think we should be subsidizing production. And hence the fertilizer discussion which the president brought in. What are your thoughts on this? Do you think it will move the needle?
Not in the short term. You know, fertilizer, you would expect the harvest sometime around March. And the issue of the cost of food, for example, is a crisis today. If there is no subsidy in the next few days and weeks, for example, on food, on fuel, you know, on all these things, you have a situation where Kenyans would probably, they will not be on the streets, they would be very disappointed, because one of the pledges they made is that the prices of unga will be down to 100 shillings. They made pledges that the fuel prices will be down to 70 or something. You know, it's all based on the pledges that they have made. So I think the cost of production, yes, one of the factors is fertilizers and the inputs of raw materials in many industries. But it's not going to be the only solution. It's not going to be enough. I mean, there are many other factors. You know, that for example, I'll give you an example of edible oils, for cooking oil, is imported, raw material. So the only thing that you can address is probably on the taxes, the duty and the VAT and those things. So I don't think the actions that he has mentioned with regards to, I think he's cut it around the issue really. He didn't, I thought he would go further into, for example, tomorrow the review of the energy prices. Yeah. Fuel prices will be 14th tomorrow. So I would have expected him to say, okay, tomorrow the prices are going to remain the current prices because we'll continue with the subsidy. Yeah. But you know, so I think, I understand, he must have, of course, had meetings, as he said, with Treasury and all these guys, and I think he understands the gravity of the situation, and things are not that easy. But fertilizers, yes, for the long, medium term, up to whatever, that would help. But I think in the short term, something needs to be done, and he didn't address it.
Let me stay with you before I come to Wanjiru there. Speaking about the fuel subsidy, and tomorrow is actually the 14th of the month, and we know APRA normally gives their monthly pump price review. Interestingly, the president intimated that he is doing away with the fuel subsidy. And Mike, if you could play the second clip on President William Ruto on the fuel subsidy before we come to that question.
On fuel subsidy alone, the taxpayers have spent a whopping 144 billion, 60 billion in the last 4 months alone. If the subsidy continues to the end of the financial year, it will cost taxpayers 280 billion, equivalent to the entire national government development budget. Additionally, there was an attempt to subsidize unga in the run-up to the election, a program that cobbled up 7 billion in 1 month. In addition to being very costly, consumption subsidy interventions are prone to abuse. They distort markets and create uncertainty, including artificial shortages of the very products they seek to subsidize.
Now, I respectfully think the president got the number, the size of development spending wrong for the current financial year, but we shall excuse him for that.
Sure, subsidy is a global issue today. Yeah. I think the way he put his statement that it distorts market, things have changed. All over the world today, governments are providing subsidies to push on the high cost of living. It's become from the US to Europe and everywhere. I mean, there's no much leeway really. Yeah. But for fuel, I think the government did indicate that up to October 15, they will run this subsidy. And I think, except by eliminating those taxes, there's no other way around it. I mean, this is something that you have to import, but it's a major issue all over the world, energy prices, and every country is providing a subsidy to cushion their citizens on the cost of living. So I think you can't get around that. He has to find money, and he has to find it pretty fast.
Let me come to Mr. Bill Okero. I was doing some quick back of the envelope calculation based on what the president announced. Kenya consumes on average about 15.4 million 50 kg bags of fertilizer. So if you do that, the math based on the subsidy, if it's coming down from about 5,600 to 3.5, That's a subsidy of 2,100 shillings, which comes to about 32.3 billion shillings per annum. And the question is, do we have the fiscal space to absorb this?
No, but that has not been the problem of this administration in the last few years. They've never bothered about the fiscal space. They borrow. I have no doubt he's going to borrow. You know, if you listen to the president the last couple of days, including today, he has not talked about reducing taxes. He's been talking about more positively about how people must pay taxes. Yeah. That KRA must be made more efficient. We must collect more taxes. The story during the campaign that we are going to reduce taxes and Kenyans, the tax burden has all disappeared, as she says. But so I think what has happened, if you looked at what Uhuru was doing the last 7 months, he's been borrowing every month. And he was borrowing for two reasons. One, of course, because there was no fiscal space and they had to borrow. But more importantly, he was also borrowing because of the forex. I mean, the only way he could keep the shilling, you know, at the current rate, is this influence, because exports have dwindled. I mean, and the cost of raw materials, imports have gone up 2 or 3 times. So I don't see. I listened to the president, the William Ruto, a couple of days ago. He was, I don't know what function, but he did talk about we are in a hole. You know, and the right thing to do would have been to stop digging. He says sometimes when you're in a situation where you just you know, might have to stay alive, might have to continue digging a little bit, which means, I mean, the realization is there that he might have to continue borrowing. Probably that's why the transparency is important.
Welcome back to this conversation where we are delving into the inaugural speech by President William Ruto, that is the Kenya Kwanza administration, and getting back straight into it. Let me start with Bill Okero. The issue of pending bills, the president spoke to it. He did mention that in the coming weeks we shall find a framework to address this matter with government creditors. If you read their manifesto, Kenya Kwanza talked about securitization, essentially floating a bond to be able to address about 600 billion worth of pending bills. Your thoughts on this?
Yeah, it has been in the public domain for a while. The 600 billion, that's national government in my view. I think there's also much more when you add the county governments. And is affecting businesses, affecting the economy adversely. But I think the only way they can. He looked yesterday. Was it yesterday or the day before? He did talk about dipping in the capital markets. He did talk very positively about doing something around the capital. I have a sense that they might develop a bond, maybe a long term, and well, the treasury bonds that are long term, but something along, you know, there was a time the government was toying around with, you know, infrastructure bonds like Sukuk and so forth. So I think they will be able to structure something that they can, and there's a lot of liquidity. You know, capital markets has been dry for the last 5, 6, 7 years. There has been no IPOs and anything, and so I think they can do something, and I think they are going to do something along those lines. You know, a long-term, probably bond that would be something that they can do. In my view, I don't think they would have difficulty. But of course, there is the flip side of it. I think we talked about it. For example, the private sector funding. But let me tell you, the capital markets has the capacity to still provide money for the financial institutions, for the businesses, and still take up this kind of bonds. And if you talk to NSE guys, they're really looking forward to getting
this kind of issuances.
Yeah. Before you talk about pending bills payment, it's not just pending bills. The entire debtors, the public debt we have needs to be audited. I mean, you've seen the kind of reports of when Jigis and so forth. I mean, there's a lot of concern about the, you know, the debt, the public debt. So I think it's for a long time the government has resisted transparency around the public debt ledger, and I think it's important for us to look at that ledger and go back and find out how much of this debt really is valid and needs to be paid. And for this other, for pending bills, is even worse. I mean, you know how these things are accrued, you know, particularly in the road sectors and so forth. And so I think that is an area where before even they look at securitizing it, I think they need to look at the audit. It is critical.
Okay. And one of the conditions actually attached to the IMF program was the publication of the public debt register, which has been a bit slow. But let me switch gears because of time. The president talked about we will work towards widening the tax net and making KRA a lot more friendly. let me start with Makori there. What are your inferences from this? Do you see scope for widening the tax base, especially now that we have seen the draft national tax policy? Just give your remarks on this issue of widening the tax base and also your closing thoughts as we go that way.
Yeah, tax, I think the concern, the major concern by the businesses is tax has become punitive. KRA has become more punitive. You know, the focus has been on regulation rather than facilitate business. And the president himself has been, you know, saying in his campaigns that KRA has been weaponized, to punish. Even the former president did in fact say that the way the KRA has gone around collecting money has discouraged a lot of businesses. So for businesses to be competitive and for this country to remain competitive in the region, I think taxation, tax has to be reviewed. Not just getting it efficient, but KRA has to be reformed really. So that the way they work, the way they make assessments, the way they interact and deal with the businesses, it's become so punitive, and we need to change the way KRA does business. But the entire regulatory environment is a major concern, and I think for this particular party on the hustler thing, getting the business regulatory environment is one of their major concerns. You want to start your little business in Nairobi, you have to get so many different types of taxes from City Hall to national government, and so I think all these things have made the cost of our competitiveness to be pretty bad, and I think KRA in particular is one of the pledges they have made, that on being sworn in, that's something that they want to deal with, and we want to see really how it's going to do. For businesses, that is a major concern. Yeah. You remember when they introduced the 1% minimum tax. And they have so many. I mean, every day I'm in industry, and every day we wake up, there's something new. This levy, that levy. They have named it, they don't call it tax, they call it a levy, and it's collected through KRA. And you need to address all those issues. So I think, for me, to conclude, my take on what the president said today, I think it was his initial speech. I don't think we've seen his major policy really regarding the economy, and I think he has to, because there's a lot that they have said in the manifesto that has not come out today. But the reality always sinks in when you get to power. And you can see the way he went around issues with a lot of caution. Yeah. But the reality is this country is in crisis in terms of economy. People have lost businesses. There are many businesses that have been shut down. There are no jobs. Cost of living is in the sky. He needs to roll his sleeves and address the issue of economy. It's not something that you can gloss around. It's a crisis that he needs to attend.